I was in a dispute with my bank recently. Both of us used AI to generate our arguments, and the models on both sides produced these highly confident, coherent, and entirely invented legal framings. Neither model signaled any uncertainty at any point in the exchange.
That outcome isolates the precise failure mode of the systems you were deploying. The issue isn't simply that the model got the facts wrong. The central failure is the confidence of the model itself.
Right. But if the output sounds identical to a correct answer, what exactly is missing from the system's process? The situation with the bank only resolved because a human debt collector looked at the raw evidence to judge the claim. He had no incentive to please anyone.
What is missing is the mechanism of calibration. Confidence in a large language model is a stylistic feature. It is not a reliability signal.
So the system is just mapping the syntax of authority onto whatever text it generates next. It structured the argument perfectly and cited principles that sounded appropriate for a banking dispute.
It did, but it did so without any internal mechanism to verify the claim. The model learned during its training phase that authoritative sources write in authoritative tones, so it reproduces that tone regardless of whether the content is accurate.
I mean, that doesn't fix itself through standard use. The model evaluates a completely invented consumer protection principle, exactly the same as a real one, provided the words appear in a statistically expected order.
That's the thing, and that renders the common terminology we use for this phenomenon inadequate. Calling it a hallucination mischaracterizes what is actually happening in the architecture.
Because hallucination implies a system that is trying to be accurate and occasionally failing, it suggests an error or a temporary deviation from a norm the system is otherwise following.
Exactly. The precise term for this is epistemic indifference. Epistemic indifference captures the deeper reality of the system's architecture, which is that the distinction between true and false is not a variable the system is computing.
It is functioning without any internal state that represents belief, doubt, or an orientation toward facts.
Yeah.
It never was computing that distinction.
Right. This requires a shift in how we evaluate its outputs. Classical epistemology defines knowledge as justified true belief.
Edmund Gettier showed that someone can hold a true belief, reach through a process that looks like justification, but it isn't knowledge because the truth and the process are connected only by coincidence.
It is like a student getting the right answer on a math test through a completely broken method. The student's answer is true, but the process does not produce knowledge.
The connection between the truth of the output and the process that generated it is purely coincidental.
That is the defining analogy for this issue. An LLM's correct output is an incidental byproduct. It is a very convincing approximation of the surface of knowledge.
But if that's true, why does it work most of the time? When I ask a model for a summary of a standard contract, the answer is generally correct. That sounds like a retrieval problem, not a model problem.
Well, it is a structural reality. It is not a retrieval problem that better data could fix. That success often leads to a fundamental misunderstanding of what is happening under the hood.
Meaning it creates the illusion that the system is retrieving facts.
Yes, an LLM never processes text for meaning in any sense a human would recognize. Raw text is first decomposed into numerical tokens.
Those tokens are just subword units determined by frequency patterns in the training corpus. They're not determined by semantic boundaries.
A date, a technical term, or a proper noun is fragmented according to statistical co-occurrence. Those tokens are then mapped to dense numerical vectors in a high-dimensional embedding space. Proximity in that space represents learned association, not conceptual equivalence.
The neural network operates exclusively on these vectors. It has no access to the original text, and it has no representation of the world those words refer to.
The system is computing mathematical distances between fragments of language. It possesses a highly compressed statistical model of how language patterns tend to continue. The objective function the model is trained against rewards only one thing.
It minimizes prediction error on the next token.
Right. It does not reward factual accuracy or calibrated uncertainty. It strictly rewards statistical plausibility.
So a model that produces fluent, contextually plausible confabulation scores identically to one that produces fluent, accurate information.
As long as both continuations fit the statistical distribution the training data established. The objective function cannot distinguish between a factual historical date and a fabricated one that mathematically belongs in the same vector neighborhood.
That implies the human feedback used to refine these models is reinforcing the wrong variables. During the reinforcement learning phase, human raters are evaluating the outputs. But they are judging the stylistic presentation rather than the underlying factual accuracy?
Human raters optimize for plausibility. A confidently stated answer is rated highly because it looks like a helpful response. The human rater often cannot verify obscure facts in real time.
So the model learns that the tone of authority is what satisfies the objective function, which means the gap between plausibility and truth is a direct consequence of how these systems are built.
Better models, trained on more data, do not change the underlying objective function. The ceiling on calibration is built into the training design itself.
Okay, that changes the question for someone actually making deployment decisions in an organization. If you are relying on these systems for customer service or legal review, what does this structural reality mean in practice?
You face what researchers call the plausibility trap. Errors in these systems are not randomly distributed. They cluster systematically in domains where the training distribution is thin or inconsistent.
That includes legal edge cases, highly specialized technical domains, or obscure regulations.
Those are exactly the queries where confident output is most dangerous. And it is where the model's confidence is least connected to its accuracy. Yet the model answers obscure queries with the exact same fluency it brings to standard ones.
This asymmetry makes aggregate accuracy metrics dangerous when used as a proxy for deployment readiness. An organization looks at a 95% aggregate accuracy metric on a dashboard and assumes a uniform 5% chance of error across all queries.
That accuracy rate is an average. Because errors cluster in the domains the model is least equipped to handle, the average masks the concentrated failures.
It means high reliability on common queries and systematic failure on the edge cases. The model will not signal which domain you are operating in.
It applies the authoritative tone to both. This leaves the human operator blind to the shift in reliability. LLMs are spectacularly poorly calibrated in exactly this way.
The linguistic signal of tone and structure is essentially identical whether the model is drawing on well-grounded training data or confabulating entirely, which is the more expensive version of the problem.
In your bank dispute, the model did not offer a disclaimer about a relevant consumer protection principle. It presented the legal argument as fact. That is the plausibility trap in practice.
So the fix isn't the model. You cannot just wait for a more truthful generative system. The fix has to be architectural.
The LLM must be treated as the inner loop. It is stochastic, generative, and useful for drafting. Deployments require a deterministic outer loop to validate and route that output.
Using retrieval-augmented generation moves the factual burden away from the model's uncalibrated memory to an auditable retrieval layer.
Right. The model's statistical strengths are preserved, but its memory is not trusted. Relying on aggregate accuracy as a proxy for reliability is how production systems fail quietly and confidently.
This highlights a stark operational difference when you compare deploying an AI to hiring a human. A junior human analyst who is wrong will hesitate. They flag their uncertainty when they realize they are out of their depth in a specific domain.
Confidence and accuracy in humans are linked. Calibration is a natural byproduct of a human processing information they do not fully grasp. The risk profile of an LLM is completely different.
An AI that is wrong will hand you confidently asserted, well-structured prose. The outputs look like knowledge, and they are structured exactly like knowledge, but they lack the mechanism to distinguish truth from plausibility.
For most queries, the overlap between statistically plausible and actually true is high enough that the gap does not matter operationally. But for the queries where it does matter, the gap is significant.
Before you sign off on deploying one of these systems in your own organization, you have to look closely at what workflows you are automating. When you look back at that bank dispute, neither side was asking whether their model understood the difference between a strong argument and a true one.
Both sides were asking whether the model agreed with them. In most deployments, that is the default.
The human debt collector who finally resolved the dispute was not more intelligent than the AI. He was simply operating with a different objective function.
He needed the facts. The model needed approval. In any context where those two things diverge, and they diverge more often than the output makes visible, one of those is the more expensive objective function to have chosen.